My name is David, and this is where my story takes a turn. Or perhaps, where everything I believed falls apart. This morning, like every morning, I woke to the sound of my wife Rachel's voice as she sang in the bathroom. That sound used to bring me comfort, a sense of normalcy in our life together. But today, it felt off, like the melody carried a burden, a hidden truth. Rachel and I crossed paths in our late 20s, both fresh out of grad school, bursting with ambition and dreams of making a mark on the world. We tied the knot within a year, drawn together by our common goals and ideals. Our life, as I envisioned it, was solid, built on mutual respect and the kind of partnership I always dreamed of. I am a software developer, often lost in lines of code, solving problems that seem critical in the moment, but insignificant in the grand scheme. Rachel is a marketing consultant, her world a whirlwind of creativity and networking. Our demanding careers were supposed to be stepping stones to our dreams, not obstacles to our relationship. Or so I believed. The doubt crept in slowly. A late meeting here, an unexpected business trip there. Normal in our lines of work, but something in the way Rachel started guarding her phone, or how her excuses felt too practiced, stirred a nagging suspicion that I could not shake. Last night was a tipping point. Rachel was at yet another late business dinner, one of many this month. She texted to say it would run later than expected, adding a smiley face to soften the blow. I tried to lose myself in work, the glow of my computer screen a poor substitute for her presence. It was nearly midnight when she finally came home, her face flushed from the cold, her eyes avoiding mine. She launched into a recount of her dinner, her words tumbling out rapidly, too rapidly. There was a nervous energy about her, an unfamiliar edge to her voice. When she kissed me goodnight, her lips were tight, her touch fleeting. Lying in bed next to her, watching the rise and fall of her chest, I felt a growing dread at the thought of uncovering something that could destroy my world. But I also knew I could not keep ignoring these doubts. I had to uncover the truth, no matter how painful it might be. Tomorrow, I resolved, I would start seeking answers. Tomorrow, I would begin to unravel the threads of suspicion, hoping to both clear my wife's name and brace myself for the potential collapse of the life we had built together. Morning light seeped through the blinds, casting lines across the bedroom floor, dividing the room into patches of light and shadow. Rachel was already up, the sound of clattering dishes drifting from the kitchen. My resolve from the previous night remained, a steady current beneath the routine noises of our shared life. I got out of bed and went through my morning routine with robotic precision, my mind spinning with possibilities. Could I really believe Rachel was cheating? Was I just being paranoid, seeing problems where there were none? Yet the nagging feeling persisted, the late nights, the secretive calls, her sudden protectiveness over her phone. At breakfast, Rachel was unusually cheerful, discussing an upcoming project with more excitement than usual. She looked stunning, the morning light highlighting the green in her hazel eyes. Watching her, a part of me wanted to dismiss all my worries, to blame it on stress and too many nights staring at code. But the doubt had taken root, and it was growing, relentless and unyielding. I might be late again tonight, she said as she filled my coffee cup. Her hands steady, her voice casual. We have a new client from overseas, and the team is meeting for dinner to discuss the campaign. I will try not to be too late. Sounds important, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Which client is it? Oh, just some big tech firm from Japan. You would not know them, she answered quickly, too quickly. I nodded, pretending to be focused on my toast, while my mind raced. It was not like Rachel to withhold details. She used to joke that her life was an open book compared to my code-encrypted one. Once she left for work, the silence of the house felt oppressive. I knew I could not just sit there, letting the day slip away, consumed by fears and suspicions. I needed answers. Pulling out my laptop, I began with what I knew best: digital trails. Rachel and I shared a cloud account for storing photos and documents, a convenience we set up years ago. As I logged in, I tried to convince myself that I was just being cautious, that a loving husband should trust his wife. But another part of me argued that a loving husband would also want to protect his marriage from potential threats, even if those threats might come from within. The cloud was filled with pictures of vacations, family gatherings, and our dog, Max. I sifted through them, looking for anything recent that seemed out of place. That was when I noticed a folder, that had been recently updated. Something new labeled Work Events, Private. Private. The word echoed in my head. Why would Rachel need a private folder in our shared cloud? My heart raced as I clicked on it, half hoping it was nothing, just work photos she had not sorted yet. The first few pictures were harmless, office parties, team lunches, but as I scrolled to the newer images, my breath caught in my throat. There she was, Rachel, looking stunning, more vibrant than I had seen her in a while. But she was not alone. In each photo, she was with the same man, a tall, distinguished-looking individual I had never seen before. They were laughing, his hand resting lightly on her back, their closeness unmistakable. I closed the laptop, my mind spinning. These photos were not concrete proof of an affair, but they were a lead, a thread I could not ignore. I needed more evidence before I could confront her, something solid to either confirm or dispel my fears. Tonight I decided I would follow her to this dinner. If she was meeting her team, I would see it for myself. If not, well, I would deal with that when the time came. For now, the thread of doubt continued to unravel, and I was too far gone to simply look away. The day dragged on, each hour marked by the relentless tick of the clock and the gnawing anxiety in my gut. My work suffered. Lines of code became a meaningless blur as my mind replayed the images of Rachel and the unknown man, their intimacy a stark contrast to the growing chasm between us. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, I prepared for the evening. I told myself this was necessary, that any loving husband would want to protect his marriage and face painful truths head-on. Yet, a part of me felt like a stranger, teetering on the edge of trust, staring into the abyss. Rachel left for her business dinner with a breezy kiss on my cheek and a promise to not be late. I watched her drive away, the taillights of her car fading into the twilight. Once she was gone, I waited a few minutes, then followed. The address she had left open on her laptop was for a high-end restaurant downtown, a place where we had once celebrated our anniversary. The irony was not lost on me. I parked across the street from the restaurant, my car hidden in the shadows of dusk. The evening air was cool, and people around me were bundled in coats, their faces obscured by scarves and hats, each of them a mystery. I felt a strange kinship with these strangers, each perhaps carrying their own burdens of doubt and suspicion. From my vantage point, I could see the entrance to the restaurant. Patrons came and went, mostly couples, some families. The warmth of the restaurant spilled out each time the door opened, a fleeting glimpse into a world that now seemed alien to me. Then I saw her. Rachel arrived alone, and with each step she took towards the door, my heart sank deeper. She paused before entering, glancing around as if sensing my gaze. I ducked instinctively, my breath catching. When I looked again, she was gone, swallowed by the warmth of the restaurant. Minutes felt like hours as I waited, watching the door intently, a cold knot forming in my stomach. Couples and groups came and went, their laughter and warmth a painful contrast to my growing despair. Then he appeared, the man from the photos, his elegance and confidence unmistakable. He paused at the entrance, scanning the street much like Rachel had. My grip on the steering wheel tightened, my knuckles white with the effort to stay composed. When Rachel greeted him, my worst fears were confirmed. Their interaction was not that of colleagues, but of lovers. The ease with which she touched his arm, the way she leaned into him with familiarity and affection, it was all the proof I needed. I should have confronted them right then, demanded answers, shattered the facade as they had shattered my trust. But I could not move. I was frozen, not by the cold, but by the crushing realization of betrayal. They eventually disappeared inside, leaving me alone to grapple with the fragments of my shattered reality. Sitting alone in the dim light of my car, the distant hum of the city fading into the background, I realized this was the beginning of the end. Whatever came next, whether confrontations or heartbreak, tonight marked the undeniable shattering of our marriage. I would confront Rachel, but not tonight. Tonight I mourned the loss of what I had believed to be true love, the kind that was supposed to endure a lifetime. As the hours of the night slipped towards morning, I started the car and drove home, the silence in my heart a stark echo of the emptiness in our bed where Rachel would no longer lie. The drive home was filled with a haunting silence, broken only by the echoes of my own thoughts. Streets I had driven countless times now seemed veiled in a darkness that mirrored my inner turmoil. When I arrived home, the house was still, its shadows deeper and more ominous than ever before. I sat in the living room in the dark, the weight of what I had witnessed bearing down on me. The images of Rachel and that man, laughing and touching, were etched into my mind, their intimacy undeniable. I tried to make sense of it all, to prepare myself for the confrontation that I knew was inevitable. Yet when I heard Rachel's car pull into the driveway, my heart pounded with a mix of dread and a desperate need for answers. Rachel entered the house quietly, probably thinking I was asleep. When she saw me sitting in the dark, her body tensed with surprise. "David?" Her voice was tentative, a clear note of confusion in it. "What are you doing sitting in the dark? Is everything okay?" I stood up, my movements rigid, struggling to keep my emotions in check. "No, everything is not okay. We need to talk, Rachel." She turned on the light, her face revealing concern. "What is wrong?" I took a deep breath, the words painful but necessary. "I saw you tonight with him." Rachel's expression shifted from shock to confusion. "With who, David? What are you talking about?" "The man from the restaurant. I saw how close you two were. It is pretty clear what is going on." Rachel's face hardened with disbelief. "You were spying on me?" "David, I was at a dinner with clients." "Yes, there was a man there. He is a new client. But whatever you think you saw, you are wrong." Her denial was firm, her tone mixed with anger and hurt. "I cannot believe you would think that of me, that you would go to such lengths without even asking me about it first." I felt a flicker of doubt, but the images I had seen were vivid and telling. "Rachel, it was clear from what I saw. How can you explain that?" "I do not need to defend my innocence against baseless accusations, David. If you trusted me, truly trusted me, we would not be having this conversation." Rachel's voice was cold, her posture rigid. The room grew colder with her words. I was at a loss. Her denial seemed sincere, but what I had seen felt undeniable. I need to understand," I stammered, my resolve weakening. "There is nothing to understand," Rachel replied sharply. "I am going to bed. We can talk more when you are ready to discuss this like adults." With that, she turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my doubts and the oppressive silence. That night was long and sleepless. I replayed the evening over and over, Rachel's denial clashing with the evidence of my own eyes. The trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship now felt fractured and uncertain. Was I wrong? Had my insecurities created guilt where there was none? Or was Rachel lying, hiding a secret life from me? As dawn crept through the curtains, nothing was resolved. The gap between us had widened, filled with unspoken accusations and a palpable distrust. I knew then that whether my suspicions were true or not, something fundamental had changed in our marriage. The path back to how we were seemed lost, perhaps forever. The next steps were unclear, but I knew they would determine the future of our relationship, for better or worse. In the weeks following our tense confrontation, I chose to believe Rachel. Her insistence that the man was merely a client, coupled with her apparent openness thereafter, slowly restored a semblance of normalcy between us. We resumed our evening walks, shared meals filled with casual conversation, and gradually the tight knot of suspicion in my chest began to loosen. Life, it seemed, was returning to its old rhythm. Rachel made a conscious effort to be more transparent. She shared details about her work, her meetings, even inviting me to a few events. Her phone no longer seemed like a guarded fortress. It lay around casually, which eased my earlier fears about secrecy. This openness helped rebuild some of the trust that had been eroded that night in the living room. Despite our attempts to rebuild, the foundation of our relationship was deeply shaken, and a part of me remained ever vigilant, wary of any hint of deception. It was a fragment of doubt that I could not completely erase, a shadow trailing behind our renewed laughter and shared moments. One chilly evening, after a late meeting, I decided to surprise Rachel by meeting her downtown, where she had said she would be having dinner with a client. As I approached the familiar street, bustling with restaurants and glowing shop windows, an unsettling feeling gripped me. Turning the corner, my eyes were drawn to a car parked in the shadows, its interior dimly lit. As I moved closer, the figures inside became clear. It was Rachel, unmistakable even in the low light, but she was not alone. The man from before, the so-called client, was with her. Their actions were unmistakable. They were locked in an intimate embrace, far removed from any pretense of professionalism. The sight struck me like a physical blow, confirming the fears I had tried so hard to suppress. I stood there, rooted to the spot, the cold seeping through my clothes, mirroring the chill spreading through my veins. After a moment suspended in shock, I forced myself to move, my steps steady and resolute. A sharp tap on the window shattered their private world. Rachel's eyes met mine, wide with shock and horror. The man scrambled to disentangle himself, his expression a mix of embarrassment and fear. I gestured for Rachel to get out of the car, my voice, when it finally came, calm but icy with suppressed anger. "We need to talk," I said as Rachel stepped out, her face pale, her eyes unable to meet mine. "I can explain," she started, her voice trembling. "I think you have done enough explaining," I interrupted, the hurt clear in my voice despite my controlled demeanor. "Let's go home. We will talk there." The drive home was suffocating, filled with a heavy silence that neither of us dared break. Once inside, the words finally spilled out, each one laden with the weight of our crumbling relationship. "I thought we were past this, Rachel. I trusted you," I said, the betrayal cutting deeper with each word. "I am sorry, David. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake," Rachel replied, her voice breaking. "A mistake that seems to keep happening," I observed bitterly. In the kitchen, Rachel pleaded, her voice urgent and filled with regret. "David, please, can we just talk about this? It was a mistake, a one-time thing. It will not happen again." I gripped the edge of the counter, struggling to process the whirlwind of betrayal and pain. "A one-time thing? Rachel, I cannot just brush this aside. This is not just about tonight. It is about trust. And once that is broken—" She cut me off, desperation in her voice. I know I have messed up. But think about everything we have together. Our home, our life. You cannot throw it all away over one mistake." "One mistake?" The words echoed bitterly. "It is not just one mistake, Rachel. It is every lie that covered it up. It is every time you looked me in the eyes and told me there was nothing to worry about." The pain was palpable, a physical ache that accompanied the betrayal. Rachel's face crumpled, tears welling up, but then her expression hardened, as if a sudden resolve had taken hold. "What about our marriage vows? For better, for worse, David? Or does that only apply when things are easy?" Her words stung, a mix of truth and manipulation that left me reeling. "It is about respect, Rachel. How can we go back to how things were knowing what I know now?" She stepped closer, her voice lowering to a whisper that carried an unspoken threat. "And what if I'm not ready to let it go? What if I fight this, David? Do you really want to drag us both through that mud?" Her implication was clear. A messy, public divorce that could tarnish both our reputations and drain us emotionally and financially. Her stance was defensive, almost aggressive, a far cry from the woman I thought I knew. I felt cornered, trapped by the situation and her words. The realization that this could get uglier hardened my resolve. If that is what it takes to be free of lies, then yes, I am prepared to go through it, I responded firmly. Rachel looked taken aback, perhaps not expecting my pushback. "You would ruin us both? Over what, pride?" "Not pride, Rachel. Integrity. Something I need to live with myself." My voice was calm, but inside everything felt like chaos. We stood in silence, the air thick with unspoken words and stifled emotions. Rachel finally spoke, her voice softer. "I do not want a divorce, David. I love you. I am willing to do whatever it takes. Counseling, therapy, anything." The offer was tempting. Part of me longed to find a way to repair what felt irreparable. But the images of her with another man, the easily told lies, were barriers I couldn't simply overlook. "I need some time, Rachel. Time to figure out what I want and what I can forgive." Rachel nodded, tears streaming down her face, a mix of sorrow and something darker in her eyes. "All right, take your time. But remember, David, we're in this together, one way or another." As I walked away, her words lingered, carrying either a veiled threat or a reminder of our intertwined lives. I could not be sure. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The path ahead would be fraught with emotional and potentially legal challenges. The scandal of our disintegrating marriage was only beginning to unfold. In the days following our strained conversation, a tense truce settled over our home. We moved around each other with a politeness as fragile as glass. I spent my days lost in thought, contemplating my next steps, while Rachel seemed unusually occupied, often locked away in secretive phone calls or making quick trips out of the house. The first sign that something was wrong came subtly. I noticed changes in the behavior of people around me. Colleagues who were usually friendly began giving me cautious, guarded looks. My morning greetings were met with curt nods instead of smiles. It was puzzling at first until I overheard a conversation near the coffee machine. "I heard he was really controlling. Poor Rachel," one colleague whispered, not realizing I was within earshot. Stunned, I returned to my desk, my mind racing. The isolation at work soon seeped into other areas of my life. Old friends started canceling our usual meetups, offering flimsy excuses that felt like veiled rejections. It did not take long for the full picture to come into focus. My sister Anna was the one who finally confronted me. "David, what's happening between you and Rachel? People are saying some terrible things." "What things?" I asked, though a sinking feeling had already settled in. "That you've been, well, abusive. That you've been controlling and harsh with Rachel. She's been confiding in some friends, and word has gotten around," Anna said carefully, her expression a mix of concern and disbelief. The accusation hit me like a slap. Abuse? Controlling? These were distortions of reality so extreme they left me momentarily speechless. "Anna, that's not true. None of it is. Rachel and I are having problems, yes, but I've never been abusive. How could she say these things?" Anna sighed, sitting down next to me. "I didn't want to believe it, David, but she sounded so convincing, so victimized. She's been telling people she's afraid of what you might do if she tries to leave you." The realization that Rachel was not only spreading lies but casting herself as a victim in a narrative she had fabricated was a betrayal of a different kind. It was not just our marriage that was falling apart. It was my entire life being reshaped by her falsehoods. I felt a surge of anger followed by a deep, weary sadness. "I don't know why she's doing this, Anna, but I'm telling you it's not true. I need to set the record straight." Determined to take action, I reached out to a few close friends, trying to explain the truth. The conversations were awkward, filled with difficult explanations and reassurances. Some friends were supportive, believing my side of the story. Others were skeptical, their trust eroded by the rumors they had heard. The situation at home became even more tense. Rachel's actions were now openly hostile. Her campaign against me no longer a private matter, but a public spectacle. Our interactions were minimal and formal, and the house felt more like a war zone than a home. One evening, as I pondered my options, a call from an old friend, Derek, came as a lifeline. "David, I heard what's being said about you. I know you better than that. What can I do to help?" Grateful for an ally, I poured out everything to Derek. His support was unwavering. "Let's get the guys together and talk this through. You need to confront this head on, and you'll need all the support you can get." Arrangements were made, and soon a meeting was set. It was time to confront the storm of rumors directly, to try to salvage what was left of my reputation, and to face the web of lies Rachel had spun. The path ahead was daunting, but with support, I hoped to navigate through the chaos and find some semblance of peace and truth. The meeting with my close friends, organized by Derek, marked a crucial turning point. As we gathered in Derek's living room, the tension in the air was almost palpable. I shared everything with them. My suspicions about Rachel, our confrontations, her denials, and the malicious rumors she had been spreading about me. The support from my friends, some of whom had initially believed the rumors, was both reassuring and invigorating. Their belief in my innocence and their offers of help gave me the strength to make a difficult yet necessary decision. I would file for divorce. With my decision firm, I contacted a lawyer the next morning, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Eleanor who came highly recommended. "We need to act quickly," Eleanor advised during our first meeting. "If your wife is spreading false allegations, we need to get your side of the story legally documented before things escalate." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow as we discussed the formal end of my marriage. Eleanor's efficiency provided a much-needed sense of control in the chaos that had taken over my life. Just as I began to take steps to regain some semblance of order, Rachel made a move I hadn't anticipated. She had been unusually quiet since the rumors surfaced, a silence that now seemed to herald a new storm. 2 days after meeting with my lawyer, Rachel asked to meet in a neutral location. We sat across from each other in a quiet corner of a local cafe, the tension between us thick. "David, I know you've been talking to a lawyer about divorce," Rachel began, her voice steady but her hands fidgeting with a napkin. "But there's something important I need to tell you, something that could change everything." I met her gaze, skeptical but curious. "What is it, Rachel?" "I'm pregnant, David," she said softly, her eyes searching mine for a reaction. The news felt like a punch to the gut. Pregnant? The implications were staggering and instantly complicated everything. My mind raced through the past weeks, considering the timelines and possibilities. Was this true? Or was it a desperate attempt to delay the inevitable? "How? Are you sure?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Yes, I just found out. I thought it was stress causing my symptoms, but I took several tests. David, I know things have been awful between us, but this is our child. I hope this can make us rethink everything, for the sake of our family." The word family hung in the air, tainted by my doubts and suspicions. The timing seemed too perfect, too convenient, yet the possibility of a child, my child, being involved added a new layer of complexity. The stakes were higher, and every decision now had far-reaching consequences. "I need to think about this, Rachel. I need proof," I said finally, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "Of course we can go to the doctor together," she replied, her voice tinged with hope. Leaving the cafe, I felt like the world was shifting around me. I called Eleanor to update her, and her response was pragmatic and cautious. "This changes everything if it's true. We'll need to verify the pregnancy independently," she advised. The days that followed were a blur of legal consultations and intense personal reflection. The potential of having a child made me reconsider the divorce, even as I questioned Rachel's motives. Was reconciliation possible, or was this just a delay of the inevitable? Each decision now felt fraught with moral, legal, and personal implications. The following weeks were a surreal mix of tension and forced civility. The possibility of a child altered our interactions fundamentally. We scheduled an appointment with Rachel's doctor to confirm the pregnancy, a visit that felt more like a business transaction than a personal moment. In the doctor's office, I watched Rachel's face closely, nervousness, anticipation, and perhaps a hint of manipulation. When the doctor confirmed her pregnancy, the reality of the situation hit me hard. This was no longer just about us. There was a potential child whose future was now intertwined with our decisions. "Congratulations," the doctor said, oblivious to the cold tension between us. The confirmation left me reeling, the weight of impending fatherhood pressing down on me. As Rachel and I left the office, her demeanor shifted slightly, a mix of triumph and uncertainty. We walked to the car in silence, the enormity of the situation hanging heavily between us. "I hope this changes things," Rachel said quietly as we reached the car. I looked at her, struggling to find the right words. "It changes everything, Rachel, but I still need time to process this." The drive home was silent, both of us lost in our thoughts. The path ahead was now more complex than ever, and the decisions I made would impact not just my future, but that of an innocent child. The stakes were higher, the decisions more intricate, and the resolution still far from clear. Rachel looked at me, her eyes pleading. "David, can we talk? Maybe try to work things out, for the baby's sake?" The drive home was fraught with tension. I was torn between my feelings of betrayal and the responsibility I now faced. Once home, we tried to discuss our options, but the conversation quickly devolved into familiar arguments. "David, think about what this means. We could be a family," Rachel pleaded, reaching across the table to touch my hand. I pulled away, frustration surging. "Rachel, even if we are going to be parents, I can't just forget everything. How can we build a family on lies and deceit?" Her face fell, and she withdrew her hand. "I know I've made mistakes, but this could be a new start for us." I sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on me. "I need time to think about all of this. Being parents is one thing, but us being together is another. We need to consider if trying to stay together is really best for this child." As the days passed, the situation grew more complex. Rachel's narrative to our friends and family subtly shifted. She portrayed herself as the wrong party trying to save our marriage for the sake of our unborn child, causing many to view me as the unreasonable one. Phone calls and visits from concerned relatives became frequent, each one a reminder of how public our private struggles had become. Feeling cornered and manipulated, I met with Eleanor to discuss the implications of the pregnancy on the divorce proceedings. Legally, this complicates your situation. If you proceed with the divorce, you must prepare for a custody battle and potential child support, she explained, her tone clinical yet sympathetic. The reality of legal battles and custody disputes loomed large, painting a stark picture of the future. Despite the complications, my resolve to not return to a marriage built on deception remained firm. I want to proceed with the divorce, I told Eleanor, but I also want to be part of my child's life no matter what. As we prepared the necessary documents, I reached out to a few friends who had been through similar situations. Their advice was a mix of caution and encouragement, each story a tapestry of personal pain and eventual adaptation. The decision to divorce despite the pregnancy was not received well. Rachel was furious when I informed her, accusing me of abandoning her and the baby. "You're choosing to tear our family apart before it even starts," she cried. "It's not about tearing anything apart, Rachel. It's about setting it right." "I can be a father without being your husband," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. As I left that night to stay at a friend's place, the weight of the upcoming challenges felt immense. But amidst the fear and uncertainty, there was a flicker of hope, a chance to start anew, not just for myself, but for my child. The road ahead was fraught with legal and emotional battles, but I was determined to walk it with integrity and hope. In the weeks that followed my decision to proceed with the divorce despite Rachel's pregnancy, the situation grew increasingly contentious. Rachel's initial shock turned into a hardened resolve to fight the divorce every step of the way. The narrative she painted to our friends and family became one of a callous husband abandoning his pregnant wife, a portrayal that isolated me further within our social circles. My lawyer, Eleanor, prepared me for the difficult path ahead. "These cases can get messy, especially with a child involved. You need to be prepared for emotional and possibly public confrontations," she cautioned during one of our strategy meetings. We filed the divorce papers citing irreconcilable differences, careful to navigate the delicate situation without escalating tensions unnecessarily. However, Rachel's reaction to the filing was explosive. She accused me of cruelty and emotional abandonment, using her pregnancy as a shield against the dissolution of our marriage. "David, how could you do this to me, to your unborn child?" Rachel confronted me one evening after she received the divorce papers, her voice filled with a mix of anger and distress. "I'm not abandoning our child, Rachel. I will support our child, but our marriage is beyond repair. You know the reasons why," I replied, trying to maintain a level of calm despite the swirling emotions. The legal proceedings slowly ground forward, with Rachel contesting every term and condition. Custody and support arrangements became battlegrounds. I was committed to being a part of my child's life, and Eleanor recommended filing for joint custody, which only intensified Rachel's antagonism. During this time, my relationship with our mutual friends and some family members deteriorated further. Rachel's narrative had taken root, and despite my efforts to explain my side, the community's sympathy lay heavily with her. I found solace in support groups for divorcing parents and a few close friends who stood by me, understanding the complexities of the situation. As the pregnancy progressed, so did our divorce proceedings. We attended mandatory mediation sessions, which were fraught with tension. Rachel often brought up the pregnancy, using it as an emotional lever to gain favorable terms. Despite the manipulative tactics, I focused on the bigger picture, establishing a stable future for my child. "I want to ensure that our child knows I fought to be in their life, not that I walked away," I expressed to Eleanor after a particularly grueling mediation session. "Keeping that focus is important, David. Let's aim for a parenting plan that reflects your commitment," Eleanor replied, outlining strategies to strengthen my case for joint custody. The months rolled by, each one a mix of legal challenges and personal reckonings. As Rachel's due date approached, the reality of becoming a father under these circumstances weighed heavily on me. I prepared a nursery at my new place, choosing each item with care, hoping that despite the ongoing conflict, I could provide a peaceful and welcoming environment for my child. One late afternoon, as I was setting up a crib, I received a call from Rachel's lawyer. She had gone into labor and was at the hospital. The moment was upon us sooner than I had anticipated. Despite everything, the news filled me with a profound sense of responsibility and urgency. Driving to the hospital, I felt a complex mix of excitement and apprehension. The impending meeting at the hospital was not just about witnessing the birth of my child, but also possibly confronting Rachel in a vulnerable state. I steeled myself ready to meet my child for the first time, determined to start a relationship that, I hoped, would be untainted by the turmoil surrounding our divorce. Arriving at the hospital, I navigated the corridors, my heart pounding with anticipation and nerves. The future of my relationship with my child was about to begin, and despite the chaos of the past months, I was ready to embrace whatever came with openness and dedication. The battle for my marriage might have been lost, but the fight for my child's future was just beginning. The atmosphere in the hospital room was charged with a potent mix of emotions as I entered. Rachel, looking exhausted yet relieved, cradled a tiny newborn in her arms. The sight was profoundly moving, yet the layers of our fraught interactions hung heavily between us. I began, my voice trailing off, unsure of how to navigate this delicate moment. Rachel nodded, and I approached tentatively, peering down at the infant. A beautiful, innocent face oblivious to the complexities waiting outside the safety of its mother's arms. The nurse, sensing the tension, offered me a small smile, an acknowledgement of the situation's difficulty. Holding my child for the first time was an indescribable feeling, filled with awe and overshadowed by a nagging concern that had been gnawing at me since Rachel's pregnancy announcement. The doubts about the child's paternity, fueled by the timing and circumstances of our deteriorating relationship, had led me to request a paternity test discreetly. The results, I knew, would be ready any day now. "Rachel, I've been thinking a lot about how we move forward from here," I started, carefully placing the baby back into her arms. "Regardless of everything, I want to be fair and do right by our child." Rachel's eyes met mine, a flicker of uncertainty passing through them. "I know, I want that too." The next few days were a blur of legal consultations and visits to the hospital. When the call finally came from the lab with the DNA results, my heart sank. I was alone in my apartment, the walls lined with pictures of happier times, a stark contrast to the current turmoil. "Mr. Foster, we have the results of the paternity test." The voice on the line was clinical, detached. "Please go ahead," I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "The test results indicate that you are not the biological father of the child." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Not the father? The room seemed to spin, and I grasped the back of a chair for support. A mix of emotions surged through me: relief, anger, profound sadness. It was definitive. Rachel's betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined. With the paternity results in hand, I met with Eleanor to discuss the implications. "This changes your legal situation significantly," she noted, reviewing the documents. "It will affect your divorce proceedings and any obligations towards the child." I nodded, still reeling from the news. "I want to proceed with the divorce and ensure that the truth is known. I need to move forward, for my own sanity and future." Eleanor agreed. "We will file the necessary motions to reflect the paternity test results. This will impact the custody and support arrangements." As we moved forward with the legal adjustments, I felt a mix of relief and a deep sadness for what could have been. The path ahead was still fraught with challenges, but at least now I could face it with a clearer understanding of my reality. Rachel's actions had irrevocably altered our lives, but I was determined to build a future based on truth and integrity, both for myself and for the child who, though not mine, deserved a life free from the shadows of deception. Armed with the truth, I faced Rachel once more, this time in her lawyer's office for a scheduled meeting. Her face went ashen when I placed the paternity results on the table between us. "David, she started, but the words faltered. "How could you, Rachel?" My voice was low but steady, each word a testament to the deep betrayal I felt. "Why would you lie about something so fundamental?" Rachel remained silent, her eyes avoiding mine. After a long pause, she whispered, "I thought it might fix things between us." "By deceiving me?" I shook my head, a mixture of disbelief and clarity setting in. "You were ready to let me believe I was the father, knowing full well I wasn't." The ensuing conversation was painfully difficult but necessary. It became clear that our paths were now irrevocably separate. With the truth laid bare, the process of untangling our lives could finally begin with newfound clarity. I informed Rachel and her lawyer that I would proceed with the divorce and would not seek any parental rights, as I had no biological connection to the child. As I left the office that day, a weight seemed to lift from my shoulders. The road ahead remained challenging, but the air was clearer now. The deception was behind me, and ahead lay the task of rebuilding my life, free from the shadows of doubt and betrayal that had clouded my recent existence. Finalizing the divorce brought a somber relief. It marked the end of months of emotional turmoil and legal battles. The proceedings concluded quietly, a stark contrast to the chaotic disputes that had led us here. Rachel and I sat in silence as the judge pronounced our marriage dissolved. Walking out of the courthouse, the absence of my wedding band felt both strange and liberating. In the aftermath of the divorce, the truth about Rachel's deceit slowly emerged. Friends and family members who had distanced themselves during the height of the rumors began to reach out, learning that Rachel had lied about the paternity of the child and had manipulated the narrative against me, shifted the community's perspective dramatically. One by one, old friends apologized for their earlier mistrust, and slowly, my social circles began to mend. The support was heartening, a crucial balm for the wounds left by the ordeal. Professionally, my career, which had suffered a setback due to the stress and distractions, began to flourish once more. With my personal life no longer consuming my every thought, I could devote myself fully to my work. New projects and opportunities emerged, and I embraced them with renewed vigor, grateful for the chance to rebuild my reputation and focus on the future. The support groups I had joined during the divorce continued to be a source of strength and perspective. I realized the power of community and understanding and healing from personal trauma. Motivated by my experiences, I began volunteering with a local organization that provided counseling and support for individuals going through similar situations. As my life stabilized, I rediscovered joy in pursuits I had previously neglected: photography, hiking, and traveling. Each photograph I took, every trail I explored, felt like a step away from the past and toward a hopeful future. Eventually, I began dating again. The prospect of trusting someone new was initially daunting, but the trials I had endured taught me about the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of honesty and communication in relationships. These lessons guided me in forming connections rooted in transparency and mutual respect. One crisp autumn evening, as I stood on a hill overlooking the city, camera in hand, waiting for the perfect sunset shot, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The pain had been real and the betrayal deep, but they had not defined me. Instead, they had sculpted me into someone stronger, someone who understood his worth and the value of true connections. The sunset painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, a spectacular display of nature's artistry. As the light faded, I felt a profound sense of peace. Life had indeed moved on, and I had moved with it, not unscarred but undeterred, ready to face whatever new adventures lay ahead. The chapter of my life that included Rachel was closed, a part of my history that would always influence who I was. But as I packed away my camera and headed back down the trail, the future seemed bright and full of possibilities. Life after divorce was not just a path to recovery, but a path to discovery, of self, of community, and of the unexplored joys that lay just over the next horizon.